Hey, I'm Megan Piffner, and welcome to Mornings with Megan. Grab your coffee and let's have a convo. Welcome back to Mornings with Megan. If you haven't listened to part one of my conversation with Morgana yet, go back and start there because what we covered, the diet culture loop, why restriction backfires biologically, and the nervous system piece is what we are going to build on today. In part two, we're getting into sleep, why it sits above nutrition as a priority, and what is actually driving those 2 a.m. wake ups. And it's not just anxiety, it is cortisol and blood sugar and Morgana's non negotiables for protecting your sleep. Let's get back into it. I
Yeah.
love your descriptor of perimenopause being a beautiful way of your body asking you to prioritize yourself. I think that if we can listen to what our body is saying, that's a really, really wonderful way to frame it because it is. It's your body is saying, we're going to do this transition and you need to make me a priority or some bad stuff is going to happen. From this boundary picture, I think that you also talk about the idea of listening to your body as a signal from the nervous system and putting in those no's and saying what you can and cannot do. So when you're talking with your clients about checking into deciding whether they should be doing potentially less rather than more, like what if you wake up in the morning and you feel like you got hit by a dump truck? Are you guiding them to make the decision to get up and say, you know what, today is a hard workout day, but I'm not going to do it because my body said so? Or are you saying like we're pushing through? How do you handle that with your clients?
That's a great question. Um, I always say sleep is your foundation. So get in your sleep and have that. And then if you have that sufficient amount of sleep and you have time and you feel better in your day to then go for a workout, do it. But listen to your body. It's not failure if you skip the workout. It's actually, again, you're prioritizing how you feel. And even if you did, let's say, go for the workout because you're trying to build consistency, but you're listening to your body and you're like, okay, maybe I'm not going to hit PRs today. Maybe I'm going to bring the weights down a little bit, but I've done it. I've checked the box that it's done and I've shown up for myself and I'm building trust with myself. If this is a new habit you're trying to build, that's also beautiful. You don't have to be at 100 or 110% every single day. Some days can look more like 40%. Yeah, I just used my own body weight today, but I went to the gym, I did it and I have that trust with myself. Even for example, last night, unfortunately, I violated my boundary, but I still teach dancing. So I was in the studio until 11 p.m. last night and I always work out in the morning. So I'm probably going to be in bed by midnight. I'm going to sleep till 8 a.m. and I'm going to come on this podcast refreshed. I'm going to do my workout later in the evening because now I'm going to feel so much better in my own body because I've had 8 hours of sleep and I've still protected that. So again, it's just about your priorities. And once you have the education about it and you learn running yourself to the ground is not a reward that's so rewarded in our society today for some reason. Actually having good amount of sleep and feeling good in your body and not pushing yourself to the brink of exhaustion, that's something that we should be praising a little more.
I completely agree. And I live in New York. And this
Yeah.
hustle culture where it's like grind, 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 sleep when you're dead, all of these things is very bro centric. That is kind of the pervasive feeling amongst people. And I remember living that in my 20s and the burnout and the lack of boundaries and everything that you're saying. And now in perimenopause and midlife, I'm like, let's hold the phone, people. do we get more from this? And there's a lot of studies that actually show that you don't get more from this. And focused work is something like 6 hours of what you're actually getting, and then maybe some admin, but you can't work for 12 hours a day and be productive. So I think where you were talking about a 40% day, well, if 40% of your 100% is what you could give, then you're giving 100% of what you had access to that day. And that should be celebrated. We don't need to be driving into this male dominated culture where it's just go, 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 go. I mean, if we had 24-hour cycles like them, then maybe that would be appropriate.
Maybe.
Yeah, but that's not something that we do. So you and I are very aligned on the sleep foundation. I talk about this too. And as a
Mhm.
nutritionist, I work on sleep first because I think that it's such a foundational piece that even if we put in a lot of the food things, they're not going to be as effective without sleep. Why do you think that the messaging hasn't really broken through yet to women that they are still treating sleep as a thing that they'll fix after everything else? It always feels like it's the last thing on the priority list. And you and I are both like, well, let's put it at the top. What is that messaging? And where do you think that we can talk to women who right now is listening and saying, I can't go to sleep. I have a million to dos. How are you coaching her through this mental block?
That's a really good question. I would love to know where that comes from because I don't know, somewhere along the way, we realized or we disregarded sleep. And maybe it's because it's a passive activity, right? Maybe because we're just so like wanting to get all the check marks in for the day. So that would be maybe where it comes from. But the way that I always go about that conversation with a woman is through education. I think once you know how impactful good quality sleep is, that's when you can make better informed choices for yourself. So, for example, deep, restful sleep, just for your listeners, that's where we detox. That's where your brain literally, you have glial cells in your brain, which expands and you basically have like this cerebral fluid that comes and cleans it up and that protects you from amyloid plaque buildups which contribute to Alzheimer's and dementia, like long-term cognitive health. It regulates your hormones, it regulates your appetite for the next day. That's where your protein synthesis occurs and your body is recovering your muscles, like literally every pretty much all of the reparative processes happen at this time. And so that really needs to be protected. You're not going to see results without it. So I always try and get that communication across about the education element of it. And then we build in strategies to make it more realistic. So like life happens, like I'm never in the studio until 11 as an example, but it was a day where it had to happen. Now I have to then go and protect my sleep when I get home. I had to wear the blue light blocking glasses. I had to take my magnesium. I had to do a little quicker wind down routine, but I still got it done in order to make sure everything was good. So again, how can we still protect it and prioritize it with having, I guess, the education around it? And for the woman who always disregards it, I just encourage them to always ask yourself, how do you feel when you miss sleep? Obviously, your next day is impacted. You have more brain fog, less energy, right? You don't want to go work out. You feel hungrier throughout your day. It's not a good feeling. We want to feel good. So that's like, I guess, the positive feedback loop behind.
What are your non negotiables for a sleep routine? What things make the biggest changes and differences for your clients?
So the first thing, as I always say, I think the study shows about 90% of women are magnesium deficient. So 200 milligrams of magnesium glycinate before bed is a non negotiable for me and for my clients. The other thing would be, as I mentioned, trying to stay off of devices or having blue light blocking glasses if you really need to be on your device. Because what happens with blue light is it enters obviously through our eyes and it basically tells our brain to shut off the melatonin production, right? You're still going to have cortisol coming in. So maybe instead of you're not on your devices, but you have a harsh reading lamp, that is still artificial light coming in. So can you switch that to a red light, for example? So like biohacking your environment or using like blue light blocking glasses for light exposure. That would be the second thing. And then the third thing would be caffeine timing. So finishing your last caffeine intake, I would say between 12 to 1 p.m. because it can sit in your bloodstream for up to 12 hours. It depends how caffeine sensitive you are. But again, when you have that caffeine that's shutting off the adenosine in your brain, which makes you feel sleepy later in the evening, right? So that is also would be the third non-negotiable that people can start doing ASAP.
That cortisol melatonin piece is such a big part of circadian rhythm and sleeping. And I feel like a lot of women in perimenopause don't understand the connection between what happens when they wake up and what happens when they're trying to go to bed and everything in between. You talk a lot about cortisol and blood sugar regulation as being drivers of a lot of these 2 a.m. wake ups. And I think that there are some other things that can contribute to that. But can you walk us through women that are waking up and feeling anxious and think that they're having these crazy anxiety spirals at 2 a.m. that are about maybe the to do list, or maybe it's just they think that they're going crazy. And we know that they're not going crazy. Can you walk us through what's happening with those 2 a.m. wake ups that are being driven by this cortisol, insulin, blood sugar piece?
Absolutely. So the two between 2 a.m. to 4 a.m., that's like the typical midlife wake up point, right? And you're so right that it comes from either a blood sugar spike or cortisol. So, firstly, if it's a cortisol element, maybe you've felt before you go to bed, like racing thoughts, and you have so much on your to-do list. So that could be like the first thing you're having trouble sleeping, and then you'll get a burst of cortisol around halfway through the night, and then it's very hard to go back to sleep. That the same thing occurs when you have that blood sugar instability, when women are waking up around 2 to 4 a.m. and maybe they've had a very sugary meal before, or they're dealing with insulin resistance and just general energy dips and crashes throughout their day. If your blood sugar levels drop too low, then what will happen is your body will send out a cortisol response. It will wake you up to go and get some fuel for your body because your blood sugar levels have dropped. So, strategy that I love to use around that is having a bulletproof tea before bed because there's a lot of healthy fats in there to stabilize your blood sugar. So, a bulletproof tea is some type of chamomile or lavender or skullcap tea, like good soothing herb. And let's put in like 1 tablespoon of organic grass fed butter or ghee, blend it and add MCT oil to it. And then you will also help your brain detox more while you're sleeping, but you're also basically protecting your blood sugar levels. So that would be another thing that you could do.
I love that having a little bit of fat to get us through the night. And I find that with some clients, they do well with fat, and some clients do well with a little bit of a complex carb. It just depends on who that person is and
Yeah.
how their body is tolerating it. But that 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. wake up, when you have that drop, you also get that adrenaline surge because your cortisol is used to bring up your blood sugar. Those guys are besties and they hang out together. But that adrenaline is kind of what's bringing that, oh my gosh, I'm so worried. And that's why you can't go back to sleep, because if your body has mobilized for this imaginary threat, well, it's not imaginary, it's a real threat. Your body thinks your blood sugar being low is an emergency, but emergencies happening in the middle of the night aren't great because then we've got all this cortisol and adrenaline and we're not running away from anything. We're not being chased by anyone. We're not fighting with anybody. And then you're just laying there with all this coursing through your veins, like, oh my God, and doing that spiral, which then I think leads to a lot of that rumination. And then it just kind of like goes out of control and we wake up zombies the next day, which is not fun for anyone.
No, but exactly. Yeah.
If you know a woman who is lying awake at 2 a.m., convinced she is spiraling and cannot figure out why, please send her this. What Morgana just explained changes how you understand those middle of night wake ups. That is the kind of information that makes someone feel less alone and more in control. Text her the link. How do you pull all of this into eating the right foods throughout the day to set people up for having stable blood sugar throughout the day, having stable energy, and avoiding these 2 a.m. wake up calls? Because a lot of this starts in the morning when we get up, not right before bed, which is where people are trying to focus their energy when they're having these 2 a.m. wake ups.
I'm so glad that you said that. I am such a believer that breakfast is the most important meal of the day because you're the most glucose sensitive at this time. So the way you treat breakfast is the way the rest of your day is going to be shaped. So I always say that having a savory breakfast is best, but the most important thing would be getting enough protein in there because protein it takes the longest in our bodies to break down so it doesn't hit your bloodstream fast and ask your body to produce insulin. So that would be one of the most important things is let's get at least 30 grams of protein in your morning and some healthy fats ideally as well to stabilize it. So for example, have 3 eggs, some smoked salmon, a side salad, maybe you drizzle some olive oil on there, there's some avocado on the side or something like that is so stabilizing for your blood sugar. That's the same way you should treat every meal. So I think every meal you should have that minimum 30 grams of protein and a healthy fat component on there because that will keep your blood sugar levels very, very, very steady. And then, of course, I'm a big believer in getting all three macros. So having a complex carbohydrate, which breaks down slower in your body than a refined carbohydrate does. But there are strategies, even if you did want to have the bread, like my company's called This Isn't a Diet, right? So if you want to have the bread, maybe try and have a little bit of apple cider vinegar diluted in water beforehand. So that way, the vinegar basically it slows down your glucose absorption from that meal. So again, it's how you're choosing your foods and maybe we're prepping or maybe we're going for a walk after to use up some of the glucose. Exactly right. It's the foods you're choosing and then the lifestyle strategies you're using around that to support yourself and to protect your blood sugar before you go to bed.
I completely agree and feel like the food matrix that we've talked about on this podcast before, which is what a complex carb is. So it's fiber that is holding in all that carbohydrate. So just like Morgana was saying, that when you eat something quick like bread or pasta, you get immediate blood sugar. Whereas if you have something that's a complex carb, your potato, a sweet potato, a parsnip, all of those things have this food matrix that has to be broken down. So we're being bad plumbers. We're plugging up our stomach to make it take longer for everything to digest. One of the things I want to touch on, Morgana, that I think that you have a lot to share about is this history of restriction, because I think a lot of women, whether they know it or not, have been using fad diets or different styles of eating as a way of restriction and control in their lives. And they don't make that connection until they work with a coach or a nutritionist or a dietitian and they realize, oh my goodness, I was vegan and then I was vegetarian and then I was keto. And they don't realize that this pulling out macros or finding ways to restrict what they're doing is actually a way to exert control. And it may be a way to compensate for feeling chaotic in their life. It may be a way to manage weight, but it seems like there's a much bigger story here. So, how are you working with clients to get through this history of restriction, whether they are aware of it or whether it's something that they've actively talked with you about?
I actually love how you put it right now that maybe they're looking for a way to exert control over their life that they feel they can't control. That restriction element, again, it just comes from that mindset that we've learned through all these years of what I spoke on previously from the male dominated research. And unfortunately, that's really hit home through social media and through articles and whatnot, magazines and stop eating carbs to lose weight, all these like little articles that we see. Especially if you grew up in the 90s, you definitely know and have seen that and felt that. And so that becomes ingrained. And that restriction element is something where it becomes a mindset shift. And that was really important in my journey as well. I remember when I was diagnosed with adenomyosis, which is a severe hormonal condition. And that was kind of my low point. And unfortunately, I wouldn't say it was my low point because I did go on birth control and I continued eating the same way for 2 years. And then I finally was like, nothing is working and I'm still having all the symptoms and everything. And so then I turned holistic. But that restriction element was really important for me to then break free from and practice. Okay, what is my body actually asking me for? What feels really good to eat? How do I feel after this meal? And becoming way more in tune with what your body's actually asking you for. That was actually a huge element to me. I practice with my clients intuitive eating. The best example I can give you is when you take a toy away from a kid. Maybe they have all of these toys laid out in front of them. You take the one toy away, and that's all the kid wants to eat, right? The same goes with diet culture. When you take out breads and pastas and chocolates and all the fun little things that we love to eat, right? And that give us that huge dopamine reward, your brain fixates on that. And that was so true for me. So even though I was being really restrictive all those years, I was binging chocolate and I convinced myself at one point that vegan ice cream was really healthy. And so I was eating that every night and gaining more weight, even though I wasn't eating all day and then just having a ton of sugar at night. And so people will tell themselves a lot of stuff. There's a lot of inner dialogue that goes along with it. But I think the mindset around diet culture is something that's really important to know. When you allow yourself the food freedom, I could have a drink tonight, or yeah, I could have some ice cream tonight, but I know I can. So I'm not obsessing over it. And tomorrow I've had the ice cream. I'm good. Like I know what that is. And I'm gonna go back to eating foods that like really nourish myself. You then over time make way better choices for yourself when there's not that, oh, I can't eat this, if that makes sense. So you kind of break free from your own mindset.
100%. If you tell me that I can't have something, that is all I want.
Yes.
Just like a kid. You have a 60-day shed program, and it seems like a very achievable number to say 10 pounds in 60 days. And I love that you do it that way because, one, we already talked about peptides and extreme caloric restriction, and those do produce faster results. But if they're not done in a way that is supporting your body, then we do have that muscle loss picture instead of fat loss. And then we end up with a body composition that might be slimmer, but we are then higher fat percentage, lower muscle mass percentage. So, can you walk us through why the timeline matters and what's happening during the body in that phase with your clients?
Absolutely. So we have a couple of pillars that we work with our clients through. The first is the fat burn protocol. Kind of a lot of the things that we touched on. Let's get away from diet culture. Let's practice intuitive eating, building healthy, balanced plates, portioning, learning how to meal prep. We also use a lot of biohacking elements. So there's a lot of fat burn hacks in there. We also do lymphatic drainage techniques in that section as well, because a lot of women come to me with a lot of pent up inflammation and water retention from just years of eating inflammatory foods following peak diet culture trends. You should see good results from that already. That is the first protocols that we build out. So we do a lot of nutrition and movement work in the beginning. Let's get those foundations right first. And then people typically they'll go towards the second pillar in the course, they'll work through the course and they'll get the hack your body method. And this is where we align your body's internal systems so that way we create a safety response so your body can release the weight. So that's where we start getting into the blood sugar hacks, the hormone hacks. And I do cycle syncing with my perimenopausal clients, but hormone feasting with my postmenopausal clients. There's gut health hacks as well, nervous system regulation. That is all in that section. And that coincides with their protocols because if a client needs like a gut health protocol, we'll build that in around that same time. If they need specific detox to help from a hormonal perspective, we'll also build that in around then, sleep optimization or nervous system regulation tools. So it will all coincide. But I love what you said about the sustainable weight loss element. That's exactly what we focus on. And I always gauge people's expectations in the beginning that this is not something where you're going to lose 10 pounds in 1 month. Okay. That's not how this works. It's you're going to see gradual but sustainable change over time. And we're actually phasing the 60-day shed out towards a 90-day shed because I do love to have 3 complete cycles. So we see change from a cycle perspective as well. So that is also changing, same price, just longer program. That's how it would work with our clients. And then they see gradual weight loss, but consistently. And so that's how they hit 10, 20 pounds that they've lost in that period.
I think that's so important. My framework is called the perimenopause matrix, and it touches basically the same things that you're talking about. So, fuel, movement, recharge, regulate, clean, and connection. And all of those pieces matter when you're getting someone to feel, as you were talking about, that safety signal. Because if you are stressed out and your nervous system is in overdrive and there is constantly a proverbial bear in the room, your body is not going to let go of any of that weight because that's our mobile savings account. That's what keeps you alive. And keeping you alive is your body's number one priority. So it's like all these things that happen in perimenopause are for your body to take care of you. And we experience them as our body working against us. But this is just your body loving you quite a bit and wanting you to make it till tomorrow. So if you could go back and say one thing to yourself at the height of your competitive dancing career, when you were restricting and your body was in distress, what would it be?
I would probably tell myself that it's gonna be okay. Um, to be completely honest with you, I wouldn't try and communicate with myself everything that I know now because I always feel like people like us, we come into this space from our own pain journey because we're meant in this world to then help more people along with that. So I absolutely, even though of course it wasn't fun to go through, it was necessary to get to where I am and to do what I'm doing now because otherwise I would probably still be dancing. And while that's great, I feel like this is my passion and my purpose. But I would probably just tell myself that it's all going to work out because when you're younger and especially if you're very ambitious, you just kind of freak out. Oh my God, am I going to achieve this title? Am I going to lose the weight? Am I going to achieve this and this and this and on this timeline? And I feel like as you get older, you realize you throw out the timeline and everything is going to work out regardless. So that's kind of what I would tell myself. And that's what I would also say to your audience is it's going to work out. Everything happens for a reason. I'm a huge believer in that. And if you need help, that one-on-one or that coaching element, or you need the right information, coming to people like Megan and myself and actually getting and investing in yourself for the support you need, it's a way you fast track your healing journey, right? Instead of trying like I did to figure it out by myself and waste $80,000 in 10 years of my life, right? So I always say if you can work with somebody, please do it.
That resonates so much with me because I also spent a decade trying to figure it out. And I don't want my clients to have to do the same thing. But like you, I don't know if I would change it. I think about it and I think maybe I want to, but you're right. If it changed, then I wouldn't be sitting here. And I love working with women in perimenopause. I love doing the work that I do, just like you. And so it feels like it was worth that pain to now be able to help women shortcut it to say, you know what, I've done this. You don't have to go through the 10 years. Don't have to spend the $80,000. I will help you get there faster.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Morgana, before I let you go, if someone is listening to this right now and something that we talked about today really resonates for them, where do they go next? And what do you want them to know about working with you?
Our website is thisisinadiet.com. We have an amazing hormone and metabolism toolkit on there with a bunch of free resources if you want to go take a look. My Instagram is at Shed with Morgana. Please DM me if you have questions. I always respond in the DMs. And what I would say as well is just on that note, please reach out if you do have questions. Like I said, it's better to get your answer straightforward. And if you DM me a podcast, so PODCAST, I will give you 30% off of the Now 90 Day Shed program, which is our bestseller program for your audience. That's where you can find me. And I'm really looking forward to speaking with you guys. I hope you took something away from this that you can then go and use right away.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation for today. Everything that Morgana shared, her book, her Instagram, the Now 90 Day Shed program will all be linked in the show notes. Everything Morgana shared today, her book, her Instagram, Shed with Morgana, and the 90 Day Shed program, all of it is linked in the show notes. And if you're listening to this and something connected for you today, Morgana has a gift for our community. DM her the word podcast on Instagram, and she will send you 30% off the 90 Day Shed. If today's conversation resonated, part one is in your feet. Share this episode with a woman in your life who is doing everything right and still watching her body change. She needs to hear this. Can you do me a favor? If this episode gave you something to think about, share it with one woman in your life who needs a different story about perimenopause. Our bodies didn't come with a user manual, and this perimenopause thing can feel confusing and lonely. But you are not alone. You are not crazy, and you are definitely not broken. And maybe someone in your life needs that reminder today. Let's spread the word and be kind to each other and ourselves. Now, the legal bit. I'm a nutritionist, but I'm not your nutritionist. This podcast is for information and education only. No client relationship is formed. Always seek medical advice when necessary. I'll see you next Wednesday morning.